Do I do a motion for that?
Nope.
Okay. So, we'll wait, when Mike gets here, we'll review meeting minutes, and then assign a secretary if we didn't formally do that at our last meeting. We're gonna go over the new business, which mostly entails what when we went to Holden, I did community statements and concerns in case anyone showed up tonight, and then our next meeting date, and then we'll adjourn. I don't feel like there's much we can do as far as marketing and stuff until we know what we're marketing and what we're aiming for. So I was thinking it would be helpful to go over our visit, what we learned, and then I don't know about Seth and Mike, but I have some questions based upon what we learned that may or may not be in the design of the building that we had done a few years ago.
Okay.
So that was very enlightening, I think, our visit to Holden. We were glad we went to Holden first, did the bigger site first. Heather's got it, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I can listen.
We can make copies of it if anybody wants to
Could
go
we-
with
could
it,
I
but
do
yeah,
that
go
quick?
for it, yep.
Great.
Am I gonna know how to
Yeah.
use the machine?
Maybe.
We did this once before on tape. During opera.
The pressure's on.
It was not fun, and it didn't go well. Anyone else want a copy?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just
Good.
added multiple numbers. There you go, Karen.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
For the copy. Same as we do.
It's not quite that big, but yes,
Pay per copy. It's ridiculous.
yes, there's some plan or something.
Yeah.
Hi Mike, how are you? That's okay.
Work meetings getting
I'm just famously making copies, Mike.
Oh, hey, what's up?
Thank you.
This is what I do, right?
Yeah.
Try to break the copy machine. I have one more coming.
Did you say that's across the board, that you hear fairly new public safety facilities and police departments having HVAC issues?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah. why?
everyone I've ever been in.
Why?
Because a lot of times the
Well, listen,
HVAC system, they are always the, when you get to the new HVAC systems, they are proprietary. So you always are looking at, you know, the digital thing where you have all the heat, all the different zones, you're trying to figure out the different pieces, and it seems like a great piece of technology, but I've never seen it work.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much what he said, and if you can get one that's not proprietary, I think you guys had a discussion about that, right? When we were, can we back up real quick so that we can, you were taking notes last week, do you mind if we just take a quick review of those, or did you not take notes?
I didn't take notes.
Okay.
So.
Alright, so I think we should assign a secretary at this meeting. Anyone? Everyone's looking down.
Everyone's looking down.
What
I
did you
can't do
expect?
both, I know, I
Bye,
can't, I
Bobby.
just can't do both.
No,
I will
you sh-
take
shouldn't.
written minutes, but, someone else
Wait.
gonna have to type them.
But you're already the minute taker for the select board, aren't you?
No, I'm just the clerk, I don't actually
Well-
do anything.
Oh, no, you've got, so Heather's already taken on a
Okay,
burden.
yes, yeah.
Carrie has already taken on a burden by being chair. So one of the male members of the committee should step forward. I'm not looking toward, I'm starting
I'm not a
there
member
with
of
the
the
first
committee.
male in that direction. And I'm going around the table.
I'll take notes.
Thank you, Mike,
Thanks.
for stepping up.
Appreciate it. Alright, so we made a visit to Holden, which was
Okay.
very enlightening. It was great, actually, and the chief there gave us a ton of information, so we're gonna go over that, so that's what's on that sheet. And-
Fire chief, sorry.
We
I was gonna
really
ask
just,
which
we really broke it down mostly to like, we had so much information, but we went with like the biggest issues, concerns, should haves, good things, and so on, so, we were talking about the HVAC systems at this point. So, is there any more questions regarding the HVAC systems?
Nope, apparently they're just cheap and everyone's buying them.
I haven't been into a single municipal building that's been reconstructed in the past 15 years or once worked,
Yeah. he
on
said
a
the cost was
consistent
pretty-
basis. But I may not have got out and about enough.
You are correct.
That's the one thing about this building, the air conditioning works.
Cause it's old
So-
school.
It's old and it's,
Yeah,
yeah,
right
yeah,
now,
yeah.
Sit under that
Yeah.
thing over there and you can cool your beer from that AC unit. I'll add a comment to
Yeah.
that, and that is that HVAC systems are notorious for a number of reasons. A lot of us don't understand them, and we start monkeying with things, and we then change the layout and add walls and take walls down, which all messes with that. We may not have a good commissioning process for the building, where we come in and do tabs, testing and balancing of the HVAC system. So from my experience, I've seen some work pretty well, but we had a dedicated technician, actually an engineer for energy conservation, and he knew the system better than anyone and worked with the engineer architect to make it work. And, read the warranties and the guarantees. So, because they don't work is usually because we abandon, when I say abandon them, we just get frustrated and we don't know what we're doing, and we don't dedicate the effort and resources to make them work. Can be done, it's rare. Always a focus for me when we commission the building.
Yeah. And that's a massive building too, so does that factor in?
It was big, and it's not typical. You got the doors going up and down. You mentioned about, the heating and the radiating.
Yeah.
You gotta tweak them, and you gotta check your contractor, and you gotta check your designer. Hold their feet to the fire. You can get a good system, it's just a lot of effort.
All right. He said the other big issues are the utilities, their electric bill went sky high.
Don't they have a municipal light company?
Yes.
Yeah, they-
Yes,
they
and
pay
it was,
$88,000 a month.
yes.
So that's something to think about there.
But, I pay $6,500 in Rutland on National Grid
Yeah,
for the same, for half the size building.
right, so
So-
maybe that's not too bad.
Yeah.
The rates are usually way lower though, that seems.
But we're on demand. We're at demand rate because of the usage that we are, so we do pay a higher rate. The town did contract with Constellation. I think we're paying 13 cents kilowatt hour.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
It is right now.
Okay.
Yep.
So do they know what the contributing factors were to that increased utilities beyond what they anticipated?
There was a few, obviously the larger building combining both together, the police and the fire, combining that together, but there was also, I think some silly things he mentioned that were kind of just like lights going on and off, but there wasn't anything that he specifically felt was raising that. I mean, they have a massive room for their
The base?
electrical, the,
Oh, yeah, a utility room,
yeah.
it was fair sized, but not unreasonable, it depends on the demand. And
Right.
you've got a 24/7 building that you can't, turn a bunch of stuff, the comms have to be on, they're producing heat. We keep doing more and more electronics, you got, the computer stations, the monitors don't take much anymore, but, where you have a fan and a room that's generating a lot of heat, just the electrical room, they had to add an air conditioning unit, and they.
Just for that room.
yeah.
Yes, that was
yeah.
good, I
Yeah.
captured that.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
those are some things that are just realities, and, that's not the thing that everybody focuses on.
But they don't have propane or oil.
What they have?
It's all geothermal.
They have the geothermal system, right?
Yeah.
And what is?
So it's basically they're
So-
pumping water into the ground and pumping water back out of the ground. And,
It's like a big giant air
Yeah.
conditioning unit.
yeah.
So they're using all electricity to
Yes.
do
All
the
the time.
pumping.
Right,
Yeah.
so you're saving, that's
Yes.
the point,
Yeah,
is not just
Yeah.
that the electrical bill is high,
yeah,
but their other bills are non-existent,
Right.
so,
We could
for,
likely
for
get
fuel.
green communities credits or grants for doing that type of system.
Okay.
So because they have no propane, no oil, what do they have a backup generator?
Yes.
What do they use
Mhm.
for that?
Mhm.
generator's diesel,
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
whole independent system, separate tank,
Mhm.
fuel bills.
Yeah.
Which is typical, cause you're gonna have an emergency generator anyhow, and it's probably gonna run off of diesel or propane,
Right.
depending
Right.
on what you select.
So for the utilities, really their only complaint is electricity, which really isn't a problem because the electricity cost, although it seems exorbitant, is really in lieu of propane and
Yeah.
oil that everyone else is
Yeah.
paying.
I think it
Exactly.
was a shock to
Exactly.
them when
Yeah.
they initially, all that, it was just a shock, cause it was so.
They weren't anticipating the cost,
No.
but
That-
they're
that's
using the
correct.
geothermal
Yeah.
pump, so it's like running an HVAC system year round
Year-round.
instead of,
Yep.
you
And I-
know,
and
having
I-
other sources of heat.
And I suspect if we design this right and the location where we're gonna put it, there's potential to offset that cost by going to solar and battery.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep,
Precisely.
Mm.
yep,
So
And
they're
then you may
gonna,
not need to have as big a generator, because the batteries would be handling more of the load, and the generator's there for just your last ditch, I need electricity now.
are they capped in whole, or, we're not capped here in solar, right? So the municipal light plant towns often have a cap and many of them are at that cap, cause
There's currently a cap with, I'm in the process of investigating solar, and there's currently a cap up on Pitcherville. But that's supposed to be lifted in the not too distant future.
okay. Thanks, Mike.
I think if we compare to what we're also spending right now at Station 1 and Station 2, and you compare that to what we're adding, not so much, we wouldn't get so much of a break here because
But it's still gonna
that
be
side's gonna be
using- still
used
using
for
some-
something.
Right, right.
So, but I think that there's probably a,
You're not gonna use it 24/7.
right. So there would even still be a savings on that side and Station 1, Station 2 into this new building. So you could say, well, it's gonna cost this much for whatever, but you also have to realize that we're already paying
Right.
so much for certain things.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to lay some of that out a little bit so people understand. But, the other thing is their bays are they have radiant heat in their bays, but they neglected to put any other heat source in the bays. So that was another issue, that they wish they had put a heat source in the bays or some kind of blower unit in the bays, because it's cold, it's still cold, it's still,
Yeah, Radiant probably only does so well
So,
of a job,
yeah.
a large
Yeah.
yeah.
space
I mean, the
like
first
that.
5 feet is comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
As soon as you open the bay doors and trucks go out, it takes a long time to
Yeah.
recover that heat loss.
Right.
Just don't hire people above 5 feet.
Yeah, there you go.
It's like the fire stations, I worked in town where the walls were so narrow between the truck and the wall that it was almost like a hiring requirement that you had to be able to fit between the wall and the truck to be able to drive the truck. How else do you get the truck out?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm only kidding.
He also mentioned that the glass doors on the bays, while they're beautiful and everybody drives by it, they're not energy efficient whatsoever. So he definitely recommended just putting on
Like a heavy
the
door.
basic doors with it,
Insulated.
yeah,
Yeah.
You're
Better
also
for,
losing
better
a
for
lot.
energy efficiency,
Yeah.
and he said, as far as replacement goes, I was jokingly said, you know, someone's gonna go through the door, and apparently that had already, twice?
Twice
Did you say?
already.
Yeah.
When did they build this? It happens.
14
it was,
years?
well, it's 12 years, right, 13
Yeah.
years now,
Yeah.
so, because the comment I have here, 12 years in, the floor bays have to be redone, there's cracking, there's a few things, and do you
Oh,
remember
it's
what he
taken
was
up.
saying in
Well, it's
relation
a,
to
it's
that?
a design issue
Yeah.
because the apparatus bays, the concrete floor
And they're on the second
is
floor.
on the second floor, and the police station is actually underneath the fire trucks.
Whoa.
So that's a lot of.
Yeah, I'm not sure we wanna go down that road.
I would flip those two.
Yeah.
Let's
Yes.
empty the truck.
But also what that led into was having the police department buried in the basement. If you were to walk down there, it's very dark. There's not a lot of outside light, and they had mold issues.
Oh, no.
Because,
Makes sense.
you know, and again, that goes back to the HVAC system, not turning the air over, you know, properly, and dehumidifying it, but, you know, when you're subterranean in that, you know, in that level, and that's pretty much what was floated last time, was having a two-level, you know, just because of the topography of the property that it sits.
Right.
That, you know, maybe one level or a second story, you know, of office space might be better, but, yeah.
So I think those were the biggest things he felt were their biggest issues.
I mean, you have one more here, Carrie, that no privacy in the fire area.
Oh,
for
yeah,
administrative
and again,
staff.
it, for him and on his side, everybody walks through the area and the admin is all out in the open. They have their own
I have no clue how that feels.
offices. They do have their own offices, but even under closed doors, people can still hear, and for, you know, all the guys walk through that way, so that it's really hard for them, I think, to have any privacy in their meetings and things like that, disciplinary actions and whatnot, so, that was something that he wished they had designed a little bit differently. When you go downstairs, it's definitely a lot different. Every room is enclosed in the police area. It's very, very different. The should-haves, he wishes they had put on a metal roof, just a basic metal roof.
That was a cost issue though.
Yeah,
What do they have, just normal
just
shingles?
asphalt, yeah. And I think I said the heated bays. Again, this is not a huge issue, I don't know that we would have this particular problem completely, but their day room is very cramped for the firefighters. I don't know how the design is for this, if there's a combined area that's gonna be used for both, but, and the residential equipment that they ordered does not last, so they're constantly replacing all the equipment. But again, there's 28 part-timers?
That was 28 full-time.
Full-time,
fire
so there's a
staff,
lot
and
of
then another
people through
28
there,
full-time
so,
police.
but I just thought it was worth putting down, and
Mm-hmm.
because definitely they had to add some more people to their roster as the fire station got bigger, so I do think,
Do they have a volunteer department as well, or no?
Less than 10, less than
Okay.
10, yes,
It's pretty much, what do you guys call it, career?
it's, yeah, 95% career.
yeah.
Okay. We'll add one thing.
Yep.
Carry on that, the day room cramped, it was specifically the kitchen area.
Yes.
You know, I had pretty big other area, but he focused on the kitchen, and although I think we can often do well with less, he was right. You know, I'd agree, you know, that was a cramped area.
He also said, this is really important too, he said architects do silly things, like, cause they want it to be beautiful, he said, like, they have lighting that really has no business being in the firehouse, and it's something they just missed along the way, but it does increase the cost. So, like, they could have used a basic light, but they've got these really cool stringy lights with like, so, but he said those do add up. So throughout the building, those do add up.
Yeah.
Do you know if they had LED?
He
No, it's
quoted,
part of
yeah.
IT.
right,
This is-
and the lights,
They haven't upgraded?
No, they're in the
they're
process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
swap them out, but they
Yeah.
were very expensive.
yeah, it's like $35 a bulb to change.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
global
Yeah.
How
light.
expensive to run them too.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah,
You do a few every month and then
Yeah.
you recover your costs as you go.
yeah.
I will add to that item also, you know, watch the architects. They will enhance things, and I think Hubbardston's more of a practical town, and we're not into architectural features. I don't think we'll be able to inform the public on why that is necessary. You know, We're not building a museum here. We're
Right.
building a working
Functional.
building.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 50-year building.
Yeah, yes,
It's
right,
a firehouse mahal.
Exactly, yeah.
50-year building, which will be a 100-year building.
That's right.
Yes, yeah.
That's.
And we should think of it
That's
in
the
that-
reality.
right.
That's the reality,
It's a
so,
very good point.
you know.
Yeah, so some of the good things, like they have a beautiful emergency management room there now. It seats about 50 people. It's a nice functional room. This is where he kind of was like, you know, these are the rooms you walk in and out of. The lights, cause they're on sensors, flip on, but if you don't move within the room, they flip off.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, you really just need basic light fixtures, and so these are the small things that kind of get missed along the way because it's just, you know, like, oh, great, sensors, and then somebody uses them, so people are working in the dark. So that's just, again, small thing, but just something to make note of. He felt there was definitely better relationships between the fire and the police. They work much better together because there was a little bit of a contentious kind of relationship, and so it helped a lot.
We don't have that here. I
No.
don't think.
No, but it still helped a lot. They feel like they work really well together. They also budget, not together, but they work together on the budget for the building. So they kind of take turns in what's gonna be repaired and whose budget it's gonna come out of and that kind of thing.
You're gonna see a lot of the towns just have a joint public safety budget for the whole building,
Right.
and oftentimes one chief will,
Manage it.
Take it and
And
you
it's not
mentioned that some
consistent.
towns are like that.
They actually did that, and they swapped it, and now they've split it up. There's one budget, but one chief manages part of it, and the other chief manages
Yeah.
the other part,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
Seth?
yeah.
Is that-
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they also have a training area for fire.
so that's separate from the emergency management
Yeah.
room?
Yes, yeah. It's
Uh,
actually off their Bay area.
Well, let's rephrase that.
Okay.
The actual emergency management room is very similar to Paxton's.
Mhm.
It's a multifunctional room, general
Yep.
public can use it, but police and fire use it for their training opportunities, classroom training. Downstairs in the apparatus bay, they have built-in a hose tower that they have to drive
Oh.
hoses and stuff like that, but that is a more of a mechanical training apparatus that's built into the building when they built those aspects. So if you're gonna have a hose tower, they said, well, let's put the indoor staircase in it, so you can advance hose lines up it and do some training and do some rappelling and stuff like that, so that was built into the design of the building when it was done.
And in relation to what Seth just said, that particular, emergency management room is at the discretion for public use at the chief's discretion. So it's not necessarily a town, it's at their discretion as to whether or not somebody could use it, because the town actually uses the old building for meetings and things now. So that's how that works for them.
That was also the emergency ops center.
Mhm.
So when they stand that up, everybody else, you know, training then takes a back seat,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Right.
emergency ops takes
Yeah.
over, and they have all the comms in there, all set and ready to go.
So in general, how many times has Hubbardston had to,
Nice one.
I was just gonna
so
say.
that's about it,
One time.
yeah, so the emergency,
The
but in
2008 one?
Right,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
So most times the emergency management operations, even though it's nice to have, are not often utilized, cause even during COVID, right, most people did Zoom meetings, or, you know, you might go meet at the
Yep.
chief's, conference table for the all 6 of you who are willing to be in person.
Right.
Having been at that table though, when it happens, you really, if you're gonna execute well during an emergency, essential. So, not frequently used,
No.
but highly necessary when it is used.
Well, I think it's important to have, but I think it's also important to know that, you know, we shouldn't put a sign on the outside of the door that says emergency management room only.
Right.
Like, the
Oh, no.
probability of it
No.
being
Yeah, no.
utilized for that is
No,
like
not
1%.
only.
It's easier to walk
Multi-use.
into the room and say, you need to leave, we have an emergency.
Yes.
Yeah, no, and that's not the way the question we asked was, do you have meeting rooms here that the town uses? And
Gotcha.
then that's how that all came up, so.
I think it would be beneficial if we did have some sort of a multi-purpose room like that though. Just for fire training or police
Mhm,
training.
mhm,
And a lot of those
mhm.
things you can, if you host the training, it's free for your people, so
Correct.
You can save money there too
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
training.
Yep,
So
yeah, so saying.
It has its
you know,
advantages.
Yeah, seating for 50 is not out of the realm of possibilities if you're inviting outside agencies in,
Right.
you know, to cover some of those costs, so.
Just don't put a smart board there and then have a taser training, please.
Was there a
You're probably
problem?
speaking from some kind of an
Yeah.
experience.
And in
Like to
their
hear that
particular,
I don't know much of it, I only know hearsay.
in their particular situation, the land that the building's on was given to the town by people who were involved in the town for many, many years. They worked at the town hall. Yes, I'm understanding this correctly.
I think.
I was doing a lot of writing while
I'm
he was
not
talking,
sure
so
I
I
don't
might
think it
have
was a
missed.
gift.
Don't-
A
right.
gift, that's what I,
It
okay.
It
was
was
negotiated,
negotiated and.
but
you
it
know,
was
yes.
a
Mutually, so it wasn't eminent domain.
beneficial.
Give
Yes,
it-
right,
give
right,
it
right,
be a
yes.
negotiation.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
it was not, you know, hostile takeover of the property.
Exactly.
So.
And if I understood this correctly, also they floated a 20 to 25-year bond on the property.
And there are, I don't know if that was the max then, we can go upwards of 40 years now.
Yeah,
Okay.
we did in Rutland, it's not a good idea.
Nah.
Yeah, we're 20 years in and we need to basically rebuild the building and start over, so. And we're still gonna be paying for it.
Other
20
bills start coming due, just
Yeah.
like on your
Yeah.
house.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Your
yeah.
boiler
Yeah.
starts to
Yeah.
go, your roof needs to be done.
But, you know, it's,
He also said for them, the third year was the charm. The big thing, he said, was that they did a lot of marketing, a ton of marketing. Once they knew what they were gonna do, how they were gonna do it, the marketing was key, and they had the community come into the fire stations, come in, look around, see what was what, he said, and that was huge for them. Once the community got into those places and saw that, he thinks that kinda helped the turnover for
But it-
everybody to,
I'm sorry, Carrie.
That's
You
okay.
weren't finished your sentence.
That's
Carrie.
all right.
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think one thing that's gonna be helpful when we get far enough to start thinking about that is when we're looking at the towns that have had successful passages for these buildings, we're gonna wanna look at the historical history of their override passage and kind of figure out where their trends are. Like, Holden has a history of passing overrides, right? Like, they just do.
Yeah.
Pass override for school
They have a bigger
anytime they
tax
ask for
base.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but I think that's important to keep in mind, right? So looking at all these pieces and see what was successful for them, but also trying to figure out, you know, is there a community that we align with on their history?
Mm-hmm,
And, you know, make sure that we're paying particular attention to that town and, you know, what elements really work for them.
Let's see.
While we're on the third time was the charms, I think he said third time. It might also been the third year, but the point was it took 3 tries.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
That was, cause I mean, I
To
don't know.
get
that
the
was correct.
whole.
Okay.
To get it
Get
finally
it
approved, to get it
caboodle,
finally.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they obviously had their
Yeah.
plans
Yes.
drawn.
Yep.
I don't know what that period was, over what
It's
time.
probably 5 years.
Okay.
5 years time, yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
So they tried 3 times?
3
in fact?
times, yeah, yep.
Because I've already seen on Facebook and the Hub People thing, people, oh, you're going back to trying again? I thought we already told you. It's like,
Oh, I can't
There's new
remember what
people,
was in it.
times have changed, and we haven't decided.
Right.
and my
That's why
response
there's
is,
a committee, yeah.
we can come back to you every single year if we really want
Or
to,
more.
or more.
Yeah. The point is that we have an issue, we're gonna flesh it out, information-wise,
Mhm.
get some data,
Mhm.
present it to you, and then the town decides. It's
Right.
not,
Yeah,
you know, it's not him,
Nope.
you know?
Sure is.
right,
See?
right,
Nice.
right,
He's right on top of that one.
right,
There'll always be some opposition for one
Sure.
reason or
Yeah,
another.
yep.
yeah.
You know.
So, we do have, additional visits set up, and I do apologize about my missing, I was a week ahead of myself, so, we are gonna go to Paxton on the 9th at 3:30, and then I'm still waiting to hear back from Ashburnham. Do you know, does anybody know the chief
I
over
can-
Yes.
there? Okay.
I emailed
So
him.
know
I
everyone.
did,
What do you want?
I emailed
emailed
him,
him.
okay,
He's available Wednesday through Friday this week, and he just said let him know.
oh, okay,
And if it's later in the evening, then I'm sure it makes somebody available.
I pretty much got that from Ashburnham Police. as well.
Okay.
Just let them know.
So I know
you
Seth can't
Sure.
go
Yeah.
after Thursday,
I
and then
can't go
you
after
can't-
Wednesday.
Right, so,
So
I
the
I
only-
can go up
I've seen Ashburnham,
Wednesday.
so-
I can go up through
I've been
Wednesday.
in it a few
Okay.
times as well,
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
The only thing I would say is it might behoove you to see Paxton before Ashburnham. Ashburnham was built off of the same base as Paxton,
okay.
but resolved a lot of the issues.
Oh,
So-
okay.
I would see Paxton first because you're gonna see what the base was, you're gonna see many of their issues, and then you're gonna go see Ashburnham that modified the design in a number of ways. The training room is downstairs near the fire department, everything is flow there, public flows through a stairwell, like,
Okay.
the whole design and the whole function is a lot different. And a lot of the major complaints that they had in Paxton, they've resolved when they got to the design a few years later in Ashburnham,
Okay.
so.
Could we push that back a little bit? Can you check with him, or do you want me to?
You know, if only someone knew
It
the
doesn't have to be-
Paxton
yeah,
Fire
okay,
and Police
alright, okay.
Chief.
Alright,
He's on vacation this week
vacation,
until
that's
the end of the
why.
week.
Well, and I think Carrie's point, last meeting was, you know, we don't wanna drag these things out, but, you know, one per week may not be too bad.
Yeah.
I don't know what our frequency of meetings are gonna
Yeah.
be, but we only have a capacity for so much, and this is the summertime and
yes,
people
people
are.
are away, yep,
Yeah.
yep. I
And
mean,
I also reached out to the Ashby chief, and he said it was fine too.
okay,
Because that one, the building just opened up, I think this summer or the spring. It's a small community. They kept the old fire station and then redone I believe the fire offices and police, so it's public safety, but kept the bays of the station. And
Oh, that's
so it's kind of
interesting.
not
Okay.
quite what we're doing, but the office area and training and all that stuff on a scale where they had some grant funding, not probably a lot of money either. There might be some things there where I think things might have been too condensed, so it might be a good thing to go look at
okay.
that too.
You said that was Ash?
Ashby, yeah.
They'll also be good to talk to about the trials and tribulations of attempting to get it passed, because I wanna
and-
say it
okay.
took them a decade.
Okay.
From soup to nuts this time, I
Oh,
don't know
that's
how
it.
long.
Hold my beer.
And
It only took 10 years.
We can only do 10 days.
Russ told us we should look at Leicester, cause it's fairly new, within 5 to 6 years, I
Yeah.
believe he said.
But that's just fire
I was
only.
gonna say that's a
Yeah.
fire only, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, but he said the design of the building might be something
Yeah.
we would wanna go look at, so.
Because
And the
the gar- the-
site adapt was a little more challenging.
Yeah, that's a narrow site.
Narrow site,
Narrow
right.
site, tiered level, and street access. You know, concern was pulling out on 68 from here with the building being set back off the road significantly. You know, once you get up to the road, what are you gonna do? You can do traffic light, what do you wanna do, as far as site visibility and stuff like that,
Right.
so.
You know, throw down gates like you have at the,
Well-
That's right.
training thing.
Yeah, like a railroad crossing.
Yeah.
That's
Actually, I think a traffic light would probably be a good idea because if we do have some event in the future that requires overflow parking, the overflow
The
parking
rec
would be at
field,
the rec
yes.
field
Yeah.
and people can safely cross the street.
Yep,
That
yep,
was-
yep.
Pulls double duty.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about the light in Holden, and I couldn't remember if it was there, had it been there or not
Yeah, it
been
was
there, and
previous to the
so.
old building,
also-
and
So
it was
they
not,
pushed
it
it.
was not moved down in front of the new
Oh.
station.
But it was adapted.
It was
the whole
adapted
Yeah.
as far as the
Connected
delay
to
and
Yeah.
so, but-
On the other way?
Yeah,
Or the connector.
there was talk, which I thought was great, 'cause especially like on call, you'd have access out Williamsville. But I figure that's the first thing that's gonna be axed, is a cost overrun.
Right.
Is putting that
Is-
roadway,
yeah,
to
that
go
access
access
road.
both sides, but ideally that would be. I
Yes,
mean,
absolutely.
would be,
Connecting to New Templeton be significantly closer?
I
No,
don't
you
think
want-
you gain
No.
anything.
No, you don't
No,
gain anything by
no.
doing that?
Going to Williamsville is way better,
Sure.
yeah,
You can jet right out.
Yeah,
because that was the original subdivision plan, was the road was gonna completely cut through, and then
Right, I
there's two
thought
other
so.
roads
I
off
thought
of
there
it.
was a.
Oh, good till
Back in the
floods
day,
like you
back
did
in the
last week.
90s.
Yeah.
so that's the next, those are the next things on the agenda as far as like getting out to see some additional, places. I definitely feel as though it's really important, just because we got so much information in Holden. So, the other thing was I did pull, the Chelmsford Fire Station,
Yeah.
the information, from the company Triumph Modular. This is super interesting. And, this isn't their only firehouse that they've done, but what they did was they actually added on to parts of Chelmsford Firehouse with modular capability, with the modular parts of the station, so, I don't know if anybody wants to take a peek at this, I know, it goes out to bid, but I thought it would be something that would be interesting to look at from a cost perspective. We did talk, with Russ a little bit about, the chief there loves the building and he's gonna do another one, just the same way.
Oh, so the benefit is it's, the buildings, all the modular components are made in New Hampshire. And so that gets you out of the prevailing wage stuff, and then it's trucked into Massachusetts, and then your prevailing wage is only for the assembly of it. So it's a huge savings, and, Chelmsford's just close to the border, so it was easy for them.
Right.
But there are a lot of departments looking at that, as, because the construction time is much less, so.
Cause they're buying it as a good almost.
Correct, yeah.
So what's that metal bar?
I don't know, I don't know if it could be lighting
It
or
holds it
whatever, but
together.
could be, yeah.
It's the Leslie go,
Yeah.
oopsie.
Lag bolts in it.
No, it holds all the announcements.
Yeah.
Then there's just
Yeah.
really large announcements.
I don't think we're gonna trek to Chelmsford to go look
Yeah.
at it, but, and I think Russ said they were gonna be looking at it for something that they
Your
were gonna
station
do
too.
as well.
I think it's
Well,
probably
that's right.
what we're looking
Yeah,
at
yes.
from a design
Yeah.
standpoint. Like, it's very plain, but
Yeah,
it's probably very functional, so.
yeah.
So,
And that's the one they added on to the station, that's
Right.
not one that they actually, their website is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
What they've done with their modulars is really something.
Did he happen to give how much cheaper? Like, we're talking millions?
He didn't, and specifically, we did not ask. But I'm sure we could call the chief
Yeah,
in Chelmsford
and-
rather than make a trip out there.
What was Holden's build cost?
12 million.
Yeah,
yeah, and
Well,
if we
it's
could
12
save,
years
if
ago.
we could
12
sa-
million,
if we
right.
could save 10% of that,
yeah.
Yes,
That's huge.
yeah.
Yep.
huge chunk of money.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was up in Littleton, New Hampshire a few weeks ago. Laura and I were up there camping and drove past the Littleton, New Hampshire fire station. And it is a steel building built in the 80s, maybe late 70s. And they're planning to build another building, tear it down, and build another building in the back and then tear down the one in the front. And their chief was saying that they're going with an all-metal building, no decorative front, because it's easier to get past because of the cost, is just as functional, and they can get it done quickly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they had the same issues. I didn't get to speak with the chief because it was a weekend, but they have the same issues that we've encountered of trying to convince people that, hey, we need this. And part of their plan was going with a full metal construction.
And they do full metal, they
Yeah.
have full metal and everything, so.
So Ashby, was a USDA loan for 40 years, 6.9 million, and they just built it in 2023.
Yep, okay.
I got live feed, so if you need a,
Okay.
do you want my phone mic?
Built it in 2023, finished it and
She's the
moved in
select
in
board.
2023.
Yeah, I think Leicester and Ashburnham have the apparatus bay space and it's a steel building.
Like a Butler
Butler building,
building?
yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Steel frame, steel
frame.
skin.
Yep.
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 I saw that job post.
Yep. Cause that's
She's,
half of your square
select
foot
board,
of
Ashby.
your building is gonna be that space.
She's
That's
assistant
probably the
engineer.
biggest part.
Biggest, yeah.
Yeah.
Executive
Yep.
assistant.
Volume wise, definitely.
Mhm.
The high bays.
So Holden had 7 sleeping
Yeah, 7
rooms,
bed, yeah.
overnight rooms. To what extent do you
Frequency.
guys, would you stay over? Like, how does that work for you guys?
Vote
Right
for the
now,
future.
it's just until 10 o'clock.
Okay,
There should be some rooms because eventually, maybe somewhere down the road,
okay.
not 7. You know, a
Yeah,
couple
no,
of
gosh,
rooms.
no,
A couple
no.
of rooms, but then you'd also have them, so there are times during blizzards and stuff where we will staff overnight.
Okay.
In certain
Mhm.
situations, bad weather, so it would still be utilized before, but someday in the future, there'll probably be some overnight coverage.
Do you remember in the plan that current, how many rooms you ended up
It
putting in
was,
there?
I think it was either 2 or 3 bunk
Okay.
rooms, but they were like,
Gonna need male and female.
Yes,
I think also the capability was, only like one of them was a storage room.
Okay.
You could eventually, utilize it in the future, so multi-purpose room.
and that was the other thing for Holden, now they have some rooms that they use for something else that were originally for, I don't know, a clerk or something, and now that person's not there, so the clerk of works or something like that, I think he said. So, now they have some open space, they're using it for something else, and I think he did say there was some storage type issues for certain things. All of in the Bay Area, all of their stuff is out in the open, there's no doors.
Yeah.
So they're,
the
the
gear,
guys,
the
the
actual
gear
gear
and all
storage should be
that.
separated from the apparatus itself.
Yeah.
So, cancer reasons.
So there was just those couple of things, but,
So you'll see when you get to Paxton, how they have their bunk bed set up, or bunk areas, and then you'll see in Ashburnham, unless I'm mistaken, and lost my mind over the years, I believe there's like 2 rooms. And that's it, so it's a completely different take
yeah.
on how they do it, but everyone's done it entirely differently, but we need to plan for the future, because at
Yes,
some point,
yes.
Yep.
we might have someone 24/7, more likely than not. I don't know what the point that is, but if we
Yeah.
get X number of new homes, it'll happen faster.
Yeah, what is that ratio
Well,
supposed to be?
I
What?
wouldn't even bring up the future. We only have to bring up the past. We need firefighters there in case of blizzards and another 2008 ice storm. That's all fresh in people's mind.
But we already brought it up.
No, I mean, in any marketing
Right.
stuff. We
Well,
limit, limit how much we push future discussions, cause
Yeah, so-
that stuff like that's come up
yeah,
before.
but true.
And people go, yeah, but that's the we don't,
Yeah.
they kick the can down the road. And yes, I'm saying that on
You can look
TV.
at both sides, you can sit here and we're gonna say it's a 50-year building that's used 100 years. If you have a couple rooms that are bunk rooms, I mean, you're just talking about a room with a door, with a window, that you can fit 1 or 2 beds in. It's not a huge expense.
Right.
No, no.
And it says, yeah, because in the next maybe 20 years, we might have overnight coverage. We do now from time to time during weather events, and that's what they would be utilized for, so. Like, stuff like that's not gonna be a cost overrun having 2
No,
rooms,
no.
you know? We're not talking about building like 7 of them for.
Yeah, God,
the,
no,
five
I
guys
was,
a
it was
shift,
crazy,
you know,
they each have
King
their own
bed,
rooms
water
and.
beds,
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
What's the ratio that you need of, let's say, homes to is there a
I know-
ratio, how do you?
I know that there was one of those arguments the last time we did this with, well, not arguments, but debates about, I guess, like, I think it was Dan Galanti brought up where Hubbardston's population rate and stuff, like, even 25 years from now, like, someone was gonna decrease or something like that, not increase. But from that study, the need study from 2015, it's in there and says we have 500 calls, and we're already on a pace for almost 800
Yes, right,
calls.
right.
So that's just since 2015. So I don't know
As the
where that
population of
falls.
Hubbardston gets older, the calls will go up.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
But we also, what's the average year of the house built in Hubbardston? Are they all newer construction, or are they more at risk?
I think it's either very old or fairly new.
Yeah,
It's a split?
probably more towards.
Yeah,
newer.
but our new construction stopped really in 2005
Yeah.
when the
Yeah.
moratorium.
But the 90s was a
And then
big,
it was the
was
90s
the
that
big-
was the big
Yeah.
push. So,
what houses do you have the biggest problem with for fire? Is it pre-90s?
The wood ones.
You're so funny.
That's all.
I don't know if I can just off the top of my head pick on a specific age. There, I wouldn't say like, yeah, we're always going to these old farmhouses for fire. It's a mix. So
But there's not some that just make you have anxiety at night?
I'm a pretty relaxed guy.
So Rutland did their public safety in 2003, and at that point, the building was really designed as a police station attached to the fire station. Rutland did not have any full-time firefighters. Well, we had full-time firefighters, but they weren't staffed 24 hours a day. Here we are, 11 years, 12 years later, I have 4 on per shift overnight,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't build bedrooms. So we basically taken, you know, the old dispatch room, the old fire chief's office, and now they're bunk rooms. And we've taken over the police kitchen, their break room, and that's another, you know, office. And, you know, so we've completely butchered this building that was built in order because we didn't build far enough in advance.
Right.
So that's our biggest problem that we have.
I'm gonna jump in there, for a couple of reasons, having been going to planning boards and open space and COMCON for a while now. I think we're different than Rutland, and Rutland was, I don't know how much that's changed, a much more development-friendly town. And to use that as a baseline, we
right.
need to go
Yeah,
and
sure.
look at a more of
Right,
an
yep.
average. No one can predict the future,
Sure.
so we shouldn't put our head in the sand regarding Hubbardston.
Mhm.
Although Dan may have a point, you know, if you read Hubbardston's history, we have probably gone down more over time in population, and this recent thing may be more of a bubble, you know. That being said, I think the recent trend is more what we are going to experience in the future, but I don't think it's as a steep a climb as Rutland was. Yeah, you had a pretty steep climb.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but we passed the building moratorium and got sued and lost.
And Hubbardston, while we're on that trend, it was 3 annual town meetings ago, we were up against renewing
Mhm.
our zoning or
Yep.
planning or whatever, and we had that written in also, and the Attorney General canked it. However, we never bumped up against the maximum number, and they
Right.
said, and not even, I don't believe we were even close. That was a point that I was gonna
Mhm.
let you know about,
That you-
Carrie.
okay, worked on,
Exactly.
yeah, okay.
So there's a lot of information out there, and people, we need to identify the facts.
Sure.
So that people see what the trend actually, what the past is, what the current trend is, and what is a realistic forecast for the future. And I think Hubbardston's more on a glide slope that is not severe trend. I think it's pretty gradual.
In some ways, aren't there, there's almost a couple of different things here, because it's the amount of people we might get into town, but it's also, you know, he's talking about being on track to do 800, right, 800 potentially, so so it's almost not necessarily the number of people who are coming in, it's
Right.
just what people are doing on the roads, right, in their backyards, out on the dunes, the
Weather
the
events.
pits and weather and whatnot, so we might not be able to come up with one solid part of this, but,
Right.
you know, I don't know if maybe what Bob is saying is more
I think the
in
easiest
tune
thing
to
is
what?
2 rooms that can be used as bunk rooms, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about,
Right.
even 25 years, there's not gonna be 5 guys a shift, or even at the rate that Rutland is 25 years.
Yeah. Right.
If there is, there's something majorly
Something
different
else has
happening.
changed.
Right, and we
Yeah,
wouldn't be
yeah.
able
But
to
just-
predict that anyway.
Yeah, but just to have a couple rooms that, I think somewhere down the future, maybe within the next 15, 20 years, maybe sooner, I'd like to have it now, but it isn't gonna happen. having 1 or 2 people overnight in the station in some capacity would be a huge benefit to the town and the environment.
Yeah.
So that's it, but is that gonna happen 5-10 years? Probably not, but I would hope 15-20 years from now.
I think
yeah,
it's
definitely.
an absolutely perfectly reasonable thing if we're building a brand new building for firefighters, where buildings all over the country and all over the world have room for firefighters to sleep overnight if there's a firefight, if there's a need for it, that we should have 2 rooms for that purpose. That just makes complete and utter sense to me. Don't know if it will to the voters, but we shall see.
Right.
5,001 or 5,003, depending on which site you look at.
So, I mean, Paxton is probably the most comparable size to us.
But our staffing,
Your
that's
staffing,
entirely
totally
different. We
Yes.
do,
College.
Well,
Nah.
that takes up, that's on the police side, not the fire side as much, but.
fireside tends,
Yeah.
that's more like fire alarm calls that
Yeah.
they go to, but it's more, we do a lot of mutual aid calls down to Worcester as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what we have for mutual aid of those 800 calls? How many
I
account
don't have
for?
that number off the top. of my
I would
head.
guess some towns out in western
Over
Mass
100.
might be closer.
I mean, fire and EMS
To
combined.
us.
Yeah.
And what about fire EMS calls themselves? Is it more one than the other, or are they about 50?
It's always been anywhere just over 60-something% EMS, the rest of fire.
The unfortunate part about kind of Western Mass is I believe ideologically they may differ from here in their willingness to take on an override or a substantial financial risk to get said building.
So I worked in Southampton and they had, horrible fire department conditions. But the population was about 6,000, the staffing was similar, right? They had some full-time people, they didn't really do overnight, they did on-call overnight. It was more of a hybrid department. For that purpose, I'd say we're more like them than we are like Paxton, right? Cause Paxton kinda operates in their own model, their staffing, they have full-time staffing, they have 2 people on all the time, plus they have a chief and a fire inspector and a mechanic. I love Sean, but he's still unique, right? Like a lot of fire departments don't have a mechanic. So it's just a different animal. So I think that's important to keep in mind when we're looking at places too. But even places that haven't had their plans come to fruition, they might be worth looking at. Like Southampton's done a feasibility study at least once, if not twice at this point. So they've gone through the similar discussions, right? They don't have a lot of funds in town, people don't really want to say yes, they have a history of failing like every override, like they failed overrides for over 20 years before they could get anything passed, even for the school and the town itself. So that might be a very similar system to want to take a look at and see, well, what has not worked for them and what theoretically could, and how do things align. Some towns, and Nate and I had this conversation on Friday, some towns, people are historically will buy stuff, but not give money, right? So they won't do an override, but you need a fire truck? Okay, we'll buy you a fire truck. So it's all trying to figure out and understanding our people and what they're going for, and also what the history shows and what we know about those voters. Do we have a yes when more people come out or less people come out? What is those yeses? What type of year is it? Are we in a recession? Like what's the historical pieces? Because those play into just as much as someone saying yes as a great plan that everyone can get behind.
Timing is everything.
Always is.
Yeah. I was thinking while you were talking too that, especially if, let's say you went with something that's modular to, it's an easier option if you need to put
Expand.
additional town buildings, town offices, or put everything in one spot, so it definitely makes it probably easier and less expensive to do some of the other needs that might come up.
So remember with that, the thing that gets tricky about the public safety building, right, is you have these very large apparatus bays and these very large pieces of equipment on the fire side that are always gonna need more space than anything else, so it's gonna be hard to build around them. They need, you'd have to have a mega huge piece of property to be able to build around it, cause they still have to be able to swing around the buildings and get out. Or a lot of them, I think, isn't it preferable in the fire world to be able to just pull into the apparatus bay on one side and pull out on the other?
Yeah, you
Sure.
have yeah. But it depends on how many bays you're gonna have, and if it's drive-through, yes, but if there's a vehicle behind it, you're not driving through anyway, so.
But if it's a narrow, long piece, so that you
Yeah.
have short bays. it's
Yes,
easier to
but
go through.
ideally, I think that's one of those things would be, yes, it would be a nice to have versus backing up, but that'll be the first thing that would be cut out for costs.
Yeah.
Having overhead doors on both sides. You know, we're not talking about building the ideal building, just a building that's way better than what we
What you
right
have,
now.
yeah.
I'm just trying to balance out the insurance costs.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
But it does happen, you know, and it has happened, and it'll happen again, but hopefully not anytime soon.
Yeah, I think I was just making a comment based upon having, thinking of the future, that's all, so. All right, does anyone else have anything, any other comments they wanna add
I
to
have a
any of
question.
this? Yes.
Maybe, I don't know if you touched upon it with the chief, was there any discussion on how other towns got grants to offset the costs?
We did not get that far, we were there for quite a while, we didn't get that far.
It's not really grants out there unless you go through an earmark through the state, and that comes back to timing. Right? Right now, the state still has money. They're still doing a round of earmarks with the most recent budget, so I'm waiting. But, you know, you have to have the right timing to put in for it. The state has to be willing to part with the money.
And your project's gonna be shovel ready.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
the project needs to be shovel ready?
Yeah.
Mhm.
They give
And
you,
the town has to approve the whole project before you can submit for the grant.
well, it's not really a
Yeah.
great, so.
Like if the building,
Yeah.
if the building costs $10 million,
Right.
does the town have to approve an outlay of 10 million and then try to offset that later with
No,
grants?
I think
No.
in that last meeting, they brought
Because
up.
that,
Yeah.
that was,
if
that
we
was
went
the
in
issue
for
at the senior center.
You know, a design and specification, $800,000, we get an architectural plan done, bid specifications, everything, ready to put it on the street to get a bid and get some firm pricing, and the design's all done, everything. I think once you're at that point, that really shows the state that you are shovel ready, you are ready, you are committed. You
Yep.
know, the town's already invested almost $1 million in this project, we're going with or without them.
The same way we did the new, work that's being done
Right,
here.
Main Street, yeah.
Main Street,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, very similar, yep.
And I personally believe that that should be the goal of this committee
Correct.
in phase one.
Yep.
Like,
Mhm.
one
Yep.
of the major
Mhm.
kind of missteps that I think happened in the previous years was going for the whole kit and caboodle. And
Right.
just trying to get it, cause that's scary, it's fast, and people will have a hard time taking something like that. Maybe one step forward will be more achievable
Mhm.
with proper marketing and everything that's needed.
Yeah, cause we did put in for a grant, I think 2011, through FEMA, but that was the whole project to get people back to work.
Right.
We'll help fire departments along the way, but like you said, it was, points based. So if you already had plans, you got more points. If you already had funding allocated for it, you got even more points. So when we put it in, we did it just because. There's no chance, cause we had basically no points.
Yeah.
Cause we had nothing at that point, so, but we have attempted in the past.
And sometimes you can look out, like in Ashburnham, you'll know that Cushing actually put in some of the money to offset the cost of the building, so sometimes you can get community partners, but one of our issues, just like with business, we don't have a lot
No, we
of
didn't,
large,
right,
you know, we have Country
right.
Hen, and you
Right,
could ask,
right,
but I don't think they're
right.
gonna give us like a tenth of the project, so.
Right.
And like I was saying, Littleton kinda gets this whole like great reputation, cause they had their whole, I believe, fire department. Do you know?
I think you're thinking of Townsend.
Townsend.
Oh, yes, I
Yeah.
know that,
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah,
Little Starlight.
Littleton back in the day probably got a big chunk of change from digital.
yeah.
What
Sorry,
happened with
they built the
Townsend?
Townsend,
Yeah.
an insurance company or,
Sterlite,
yeah,
yeah, it's a huge contributor
Sterilite
there.
just built it.
But various buildings throughout that town, but yeah, they built it, donated it.
fire
Maybe we
station
could reach
too.
out to them, see if they wanna
Well,
build
it's a
one
lot-
in
Gonna
Hubbardston
say.
too.
It's a lot less expensive to have someone else build it than for
Right,
the town to
right.
build it once we're done procurement.
Right, Hubbardston doesn't have any rich uncles or anything anywhere.
No, I think you're 100% correct on pitching this the same way and being able to point at Main Street and say, we're going to run this project like we did this. We're asking the town to upfront the money for the design costs and so forth, and then we're going to go for offsets, and then we'll come back with the final number.
Which is gonna be pretty close to the original number, but inflation.
Yes, yes.
So I think but I think it's really important just to realize that there's not a lot of grants out there
Right.
for public safety buildings. Like, you would have to get a niche, right? Like, green communities, oh, we can fund all the lighting and all of the heating through a green communities competitive grant, right? Like, that could be an offset.
Yep.
But a lot of it,
A lot of it's gonna be right from
And
Tax
municipal
base, yeah, that's it.
folks like
Sure.
Heather, the chiefs and I are going to be able to keep pushing on the legislature for this bill that I was talking about the other week that would create a public safety in municipal building program similar to the MSBA. So that they could put up funding, and I do think that that's gonna happen someday, because it's proposed every year. It has MMA, the Mass Municipal Association, every association that matters supports it, but I think they're having a hard time coming up with a price, cause it's very expensive. So, but that'll happen someday, so maybe, who knows, maybe it'll happen soon. And by being shovel-ready, you qualify for things like that,
Right.
if it were to ever exist, cause that's one of their first check boxes, like, are you ready to actually do this?
So as we embark on these next couple of visits and whatnot, is there anything that we want to push forward with? Or does everybody feel like we should do this first and then move forward? Cause I'm guessing within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we could have these all knocked out.
so one thing I think that would be helpful at the same time, Nate, if you can run the history of the overrides and so forth for each of the projects, I think that would be, and not just for the project, but for the town,
Yeah.
right? To kind of figure out what the history is, so we can kind of figure out, once we have these 4 or 5 different pieces of information, you know, which one we might wanna weigh a little bit
I was
heavier.
planning on doing that tomorrow. Considering that I'm making a, hey, have you considered a 2.5 override presentation on Monday? Like,
Seems like good timing,
Yeah.
you use it for 2 things at once.
So
convenient.
could you repeat, taking notes, could you repeat what you're asking for?
So I asked Nate if he could run, the Prop 2.5, so the override history for each of the towns with that have had one of these successful public safety buildings.
Okay.
So what it is essentially going into the Divisional Local Services website, although the mobile version isn't gonna be maybe on 2004, just for the record. To figure out their win-loss ratio
Mhm.
and what year and what it was for and so forth. So you can kinda get a trend of, you know, do they buy stuff, do they buy people, do they buy,
Let's hope they don't buy
buildings.
people.
well, it's
With
not,
the-
they usually, when you do an
debt.
override for a town, right, general
Yeah.
government or school, you're generally buying that's people.
True.
Cause you're not buying supplies.
Nope. This town seems to like to buy roads. I know that.
Doing pretty good at it right
Yeah.
now.
No.
Yeah,
I was stunned to find out that they were doing Pitcherville. I live on Pitcherville, and I got the notice the day before saying, hey, we're gonna go do Pitcherville. I'm like, the whole thing? And they went, oh yeah. And they've already torn up the whole front of
Yep.
68.
They're doing a full depth reclamation.
It's down, it's all down to dirt at the top of Pitcherville right now.
You're clearly not following the 5-year roads plan.
Yeah. There is one.
Yeah, there is one.
And
That's.
Pitcherville was a couple of years from now. I don't know why
when
they're doing
Travis
it.
updated it.
I don't know.
Well, I think one of the things is that ARPA, is that?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get AARP or ARRP.
That's
It's ARPA.
I get
Well, it's not
ARRP
DARPA.
confused, as long as I don't get confused with DARPA, exactly. But that funded Lombard And so it may have allowed other things to move up,
Right.
so.
And according to some bills in the Senate and from people I've been talking to in the House, there is going to be additional roads money coming to rural communities in the next year, so.
Nate and or Heather, could you run through just the process once we're kind of done with looking at some of these other facilities and stuff and have figured out exactly what we're looking at? Could you run through the next couple of, we have to go before the town.
Eventually, we're gonna have to go
okay.
through the town. And feel free to interrupt me, but I think the next couple of points after understanding what we want versus what we need and would be to set up what the message is, a proposed timeframe,
Oh, I guess I meant as far as getting with the town and getting an architect to do something, I guess that's
So you
kind
would
of what I
need
meant
to
more.
put it on both does it need a vote if it's a item?
I thought they used ARPA money.
What are we using funds for? Are we using the feasibility money that we had put aside for John's Auto, John's Auto?
That's only $50,000, what are we gonna do with it?
Well, the question is, are we moving on to a feasibility study, or we've already decided
That's
we're
what-
100% on our land, and now we're just moving forward with the design?
That would be up to this group of people right here, what they're
I
going to
think when
propose.
we talked last week, we said the land that
That we have
we
that
had
set aside
was,
for this is
yeah,
probably
yeah,
our best.
yeah,
Yeah, that's-
right, yeah.
And have we ever had anyone look at that land to make sure we can do what we wanna do?
I believe so there's been some engineering done on that property.
Isn't there a
Put in
well on
place.
it?
There's a
Yes.
well on
Yeah,
it
Yeah,
already.
And it perks.
And we're not within any water zones or buffer zones or anything
No.
that requires
No, that's
a-
that's further down.
Okay.
They went through all of that 8 years ago?
Is that in one of the
It
two
was the
reports
money,
that's
when
the
the
money
sen-
that they
senior
used for,
center
yes,
money?
it was the grant money we got for the senior center was used to, do
Buy
some
the
work on
land,
the
to
property.
buy the land and to test it. And
I think we did a land swap to get
Yes.
the land, so, and then there was a whole bunch of stuff that was done. That road that's in
Yeah,
there,
we couldn't
obviously,
have
some of
used
it's
that money if
overgrown
it
now,
did.
but,
we couldn't have used that money if it didn't pass the tests.
Right.
right.
But we're certain that it's going to meet all the needs for visibility of taking a large fire truck out of that property, making the
I
turns.
do think we're gonna need a traffic light there in order to safely take a fire truck out of there.
But I guess my question is more so like,
On
you
the
have a plot
property
of land,
itself.
right? Like, if you have a hill like this, fire truck ain't going up it. So,
It's not that steep.
No, it's an incline.
I don't know,
Yeah.
But
There's a
even if
grade
it
there
was,
that's
that's a little bit down the road.
Yeah.
but you wanna make sure that there's no other no other apparent
Sure,
barriers
sure.
that are gonna block the,
Sure.
you wanna make sure you have all the, what do you call it?
I
Well, your
think
ducks
that
lined up.
2015, I was skimming through it, and I think it does
Cover that?
reference that site specifically, so.
But we never did a feasibility study directly on that site pertaining to the public safety building.
I think they did.
Yeah.
You
I
think
think
they
it was
did?
done before, I think it was actually done before the land swap,
Yeah.
which is why they,
Makes sense.
which is why
I
we
mean,
chose that piece of
All I
land.
recall is that last time, whenever the last committee was, that was the site. There was no question of
Right.
any
Yeah.
site different than that. That
That's
was
what I
going
thought
to
too.
get, you know.
Yeah.
If they
12
get back a
acres of
fire
land.
truck into the station they have now, I think
Mm.
Yeah, we should be all set.
Well, one of my issues is trying to plan out, work from a concept and go quickly, but I think we jump the gun if we're automatically going to a new facility. I think if we have a chronology of the issues, you know, some of us are having to ask, was there a feasibility study and what was there? Well, if we have some issues and then cite documents for a chronology, then we can understand ourselves within the committee before we start to inform the public in general. I will say that I understand the process, and I think we're getting a little bit ahead of it, and I think that we should I think we should look at an informed public, and that's where we take our direction from. And I think that's premature yet. I don't think we've informed ourselves, never mind the public.
Mhm.
And I've heard the term marketing, and I don't like that term because we're trying, some people might believe we're trying to sell something. No, we're trying to inform. And if we have the facts, I believe the facts will drive us to the right answer, and that right answer will be from the public at large. So I mean, I know we don't wanna, I don't wanna slow down, and I don't like studies, because studies are not solutions. They're money, you have to do them sometime, but we don't, I've seen study after study after study. Till we find out what we've already spent our money on and what these studies found out, you know, we're jumping ahead a little bit,
We must
just a
have-
little bit.
We must have a record of all that stuff that was done.
Well, I mean,
Like
the
the
chief's
two
looking back at
thousand
something.
fifteen document that you loaded up.
Yeah,
It says
it's-
it there,
it's
and
on
it
it,
actually
yeah.
has that committee and with the firm that they worked with, they
Yeah.
gave a list of recommendations, what should be done.
Was that the
Um,
facilities
At that time,
report?
yeah, it was build a new public safety building. I believe it references that site on Gardner Road. And it also says to renovate this building for the town offices. I'm sorry, Nate. But that was their plan and their suggestions at the end of their needs assessment, so. And then there was also referencing the library and the senior all in that, the senior center all in that document, so.
At the first meeting, sorry to jump in,
That's
but,
okay.
weren't we kind of gonna survey the public, capture some input earlier on? You know, after we get some basic information to provide,
We did talk about going to like a Lions Club or to some of those places
okay, to specific groups, but the, Open Space Committee just did I don't know what the response was, it was good enough. It was as good as an annual town meeting, I know that. And the surveys can be pretty easily developed, and you put them on autopilot, basically.
We historically have low
Yeah.
responses to our surveys.
And the hard
Yeah,
part
I'm
about
nervous about
surveys
doing that.
nowadays is that a lot of different communities, individuals and members are in, say, the Hubbardston page or the Gardner page, and you may get, 200 responses, but only 30 of them actually live in here and have anything at stake.
Well, you gotta be a resident.
How do you make that a qualification of taking an online survey?
The TA figures that out.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you've got all the credentials, Nate. I read
The
them.
donations?
I totally get where you're coming from. I think,
Public hearing we talked about.
yeah,
We did
and,
do a
cause I
public
think
hearing.
a survey
Yeah.
makes me nervous for this particular project, because I just think some of this is still so fresh for everybody, and where Mike's saying
Mhm.
he's already hearing some scuttlebutt and whatnot, I guess I just maybe we need to find a different avenue, cause I understand what you're saying, and I definitely agree with it, I don't know a survey, like, I was saying to my husband the other day, it's like everybody does everything by text now, nobody's
Yeah.
really looks at their emails that much anymore, so.
When I say a survey, I did give an example for
No,
the
it's
open
true,
space,
though.
but a public hearing,
Yeah.
you know, that's a survey.
Yeah.
I mean, not in the, maybe the sense
I
we.
think at this point, after attending the marijuana smells hearing a
Uh-huh.
while back, we need to silo the conversation. Because if you just open it up
Yeah.
wide, it's going to be the most ridiculous 4-hour-long conversation where people just let their opinions be known, which is great. Like, I always wanna hear opinions, but it needs to be relevant and
Constructive.
guided and
Yeah,
constructive and
Not a
Absolutely.
CF.
even I forget, I held a budget hearing at the select board meeting, let's call it 6 months ago, and even that went off in kind of a a crazy direction, and we had a guided document to lead us through. I know we were talking about different needs in the community, so it's hard to get people to stay on topic.
It's hard, but this is how you get things done. And be able to go back to the public and say, you know, this is what you said you wanted. And just because people are loud in the minority does not mean that's what the majority do. Don't let fear drive us. Let information drive us and do the best we can to capture what the town wants. Inform them and they will let us know. If we don't do a good job at that, then it's gonna be extra hard. It's already hard. It's gonna be harder.
So the feasibility study, right, so I was doing some Googling over here, so Charlton, Mass, I don't know if they've made any progress.
Charlton?
Charlton, yes, Charlton, whatever you wanna call it, I'll let Andrew know, I can't pronounce it. So, the feasibility study for the public safety facility, so they did one through Weston Sampson in January of 19. And here's some of the benefits of it, right? The work it included was reviewing existing conditions, documenting existing deficiencies, interviewing key department staff, preparing a space needs assessment, developing preliminary concept. The information assembled from the feasibility study was used to develop a project information presentation to assist the town in soliciting funding for the initial design phases of the project. Work also included developing conceptual building rendering and site plans, as well as providing guidance to the town to assist in developing an overall plan for the design, bidding, construction of the new facility. So one of the benefits of feasibility study goes back to Mike's point, right? It's a tool to both say to the townspeople, listen, we've looked at everything, here's what we've looked at, we've covered all these bases, we've done a public hearing, we've got input, but here's all of our ducks in the row. You have a question, we have an answer, right? We've thought about it, or we've commissioned someone with money we've already had in ARPA to be able to provide that for us. Here's a document, take a look at it, it's 30 pages, it outlines everything. Do you wanna see a picture of where it would look? Now can we have money for the design phase, right? Like, putting those pieces, it's a tool in our toolbox, and it's one of those things, you know, looking at other towns, you know, that's a good question too. Did you do a feasibility study? You know, what pre-game stuff did you do before you went to the people and said, we need money for this? And if you did a feasibility study, do you feel like that was actually helpful in convincing the people to do it? We have the money appropriated to be able to do it. Why not use it for the intended purpose?
Cause that was my other question, is that feasibility study has a lot of other stuff in it, it's not just specific to what we're doing here. So that it might be worth.
I have no problem using the money that was allocated for a feasibility study for just that, but, yeah.
But I think we need to probably vote
If-
on something like that, so that we're,
I thought we went down a feasibility study in 2015 when we went through this back then.
There's two of them in the last 12 years.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Times, I don't
thinking.
remember, I think one of them's 2015 or 14, and then there was another one.
But are those
And I think-
feasibility studies, cause I pulled those up in the Google Docs. So one says it's a facilities needs study from 2012, which just looks at the different departments and says, you know, you need to spend $2.5 to $3 million for the fire department. And the other was the facilities report, which was looking at each of the buildings, but of these, unless there's another one I'm not seeing, none of them are dedicated to the sole purpose of a public safety building.
No, there's not one for specifically public safety, no, it was,
No,
looked
so
at,
they'll
every
definitely
time it
building
looked at
was-
everything in town.
But that's what you want, right?
Right,
So
that
that's
is-
the
yes,
difference between an
yes.
overarching view
Yes,
of, oh
yes.
my God, your facilities are
Yeah.
in bad shape, to specifically, let's take, and it helps, right? It goes
Yeah,
back to
yeah.
getting the word out, publicity, marketing, whatever you wanna call it. It would go in and take pictures of a guy not being able to step between the truck and the wall, right?
And that
The
would
vehicle not
also-
fitting.
That would also help us get on the same page, have a document that can guide conversation during the public hearing phase, and it's not just, how do you feel, it's, how do you feel about section 2? Like, that's it, that's all we're talking about right now. Now we're on section 3, so.
So what are the deliverables for this feasibility study? There's deliverables for us, for this team here, right, like you just mentioned. But there's also deliverables for informing the public. And what should those deliverables look like? You had mentioned a 30-page thing, no one's gonna look at 30 pages.
So I
They're
think,
gonna go, where's the price,
yeah.
right?
So-
You're
so-
the only person in town who would.
So
There's a
like,
couple others, but
That's a compliment.
yeah.
so
Yeah,
usually,
that's what-
usually what we do in municipal government is we don't start anything as the initial idea, right? We go steal. So, and I mean that in the nicest way, right? What do they say? Copying is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yes.
So that's something that Nate would reach out to other stammers and everyone else in the community and say, hey, does anyone have a recent feasibility study?
Which one worked?
Well, he would take a look at them, see
Yeah.
which ones are decent, and then say, can I have your specs?
And we're
Right.
both professionally friends with the Charlton guy, and
Yeah.
there's a couple of different people that the network is both huge and tiny at the same time, so.
Yeah.
So that's what we should definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Because Princeton just did it.
Yep.
Okay, so
They're
you're
the
gonna
most
take,
recent.
Well, there's another one.
Yeah.
Nate, you're gonna
Yeah.
take the action item to, find out what the feasibility study deliverables would be based on research of others.
It's a very, very hard process. He's gonna send an email tomorrow morning to the listserv and say, can anyone tell me?
Nope. I have too many things this week. Next week, I'm gonna send an email to the list.
That's fair.
And everyone, including myself, just take a look back at what you can find, because if we do find something from, say, 2013, and it's just this, and it's someone we can call and say, hey, update this for cheap money, then maybe that's something we can do, because as everyone's put, nothing's really changed, so.
Back to an idea that Mike had mentioned, I think, last time, and maybe a little bit this time, about informing the public. I like the idea of going to specific groups, because the talk happens at a group level. It happens at the bar, down at the Rod and Gun. It happens at the senior center. I think going to where groups
They
gather
are, yeah.
is going to really, really help us, but we will need to get our ducks in a row.
In something kind of taking a completely different spin at this, something that's been kind of in my mind is the fact that this community both needs both an operational override of some sort to get us to a point where we're at a service level that's appropriate for the times, and to maintain staff, and to keep up with the rising cost of education. And we need to move forward on this building. So we have to be incredibly tactful about how that goes. And unfortunately, as much as I wanna be team, the building is the most important thing ever, I think it's the operational money that is needed more than a building, cause an empty building would be pretty sad. So that's just something we'll have to think of later, is how do we serve two masters?
So, in Charlton, it's going before their select board next week. But he said that, it gives you a decent price estimate and some direction. I don't have time to do tasks later, so if I don't do them right now, they don't get done.
What was the date and time on that, Charlton?
They had commissioned, I think they had started the site in 2019, but I think it's going back before
No,
the select
but
board.
when's, I must have misheard, but you said there's a meeting next week?
Yeah, relative to the feasibility study.
Okay.
So they're gonna be reviewing it next week, the Charlton Select Board,
And
To see what they wanna
was
do.
the day of the week?
next Tuesday. You gonna tune in, Mike? Report back.
And the time? Did it say? I'm sorry, I could look all this up myself, but you've been there, so.
Please hold.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
I can get some inside information on that side too, because one of our staff members is acquainted with a sergeant over there. So I can ask her about the information as well.
I can go camp out at the camp in Spencer, right next to Charlton. So did they have a time?
I'm waiting, Mike,
Oh.
you're faster than Andrew is, he might be like with his family, or you know, doing something
Eating.
else, he could be out farming on the
Oh,
tractor.
now I know where you're going, okay, I see.
This is live info.
Yeah, like you said before, this is live, okay.
Alright, so we're gonna continue to gather the information from these other, safety buildings, and we're gonna work on this feasibility study, and then at that point, we will do some town informing once we have pulled those two things together.
So I think at the next meeting, to your point, Carrie, we'd probably wanna review all the different, site visits we've
Yeah.
done. We're gonna wanna review the data that Nate's able to pull relative to the override
Yeah.
history for those towns, as well as, start looking at some of the information that he's able to pull on the various feasibility studies that other towns have done. And, you know, maybe not feed us all of them, Nate, just ones that you think are good.
Nope, that's not how I do things. Here's everything.
And then we're gonna run through some of the old docs as well to see if there's anything that we can.
What was that last one, so I can get it written down, sorry.
I don't remember. Feasibility studies, looking through the, getting us the various feasibility studies that Nate's able to
Yeah.
pull, as well as, any ones that were actually good.
And I'll grab the exact number from ARPA, because as I've told you in the past, but don't really wanna say publicly, the ARPA accounts kinda got wonky a little bit, so we'll look into what's going on.
Mike, you'll be live on Facebook next week at 7:00.
Ooh, I gotta talk to him, they do their meetings live on Facebook.
Well, you can respond to him when he sends you the docs I asked him to send you.
Alright, I, you're gonna regret this when you're live on Facebook.
It would just make all my fans have an easier time to find me.
Yeah.
Alright, why don't we set our next meeting date?
So in general, Mondays are the absolute worst day for me, cause
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
at a select board meeting somewhere when it's not the middle of August.
Except that if you did back to back on the Hubbardston select board meeting, because then you're not making multiple trips here, you show
That's
up
what she wants.
and.
Mike,
Right.
you're gonna feed me?
You want all that info swimming in your head?
his glasses, cause he's not seeing the look in your face.
I'm just counter argument, which
That being
lawyers,
said,
Can use
if-
our
lawyers
ARPA money for
understand.
pizzas.
That being said, if Monday is the absolute only day, there are other select board members that I could tag out with, that would be interested. I'd love to continue with the committee as long as I can, but, you know, if I'm the only holdup,
I will be as flexible as I can, that's my commitment then.
I think at the last meeting, Mondays were a better day for everybody when we had
This is my job.
talked.
Right.
so
Depends
if
on,
you're not
We're
select board
probably-
available.
depends on the Monday.
Given some of the timing of some of these potential visits at this point, we're probably looking at 3 weeks out anyway for the next meeting.
So that's the 21st.
Yes, that would be around the 21st.
What day is better for you, Heather? Cause you're a
Tuesday-
valuable member.
Tuesday,
We're all
Wednesday, or
valuable
Thursday, or
members.
Friday.
We do meet on the 21st.
That is your meeting night.
Okay.
I haven't got to that part of the calendar.
Do you wanna do the 22nd to accommodate?
I actually have a meeting on the 22nd. My select board meeting got pushed because people couldn't do it Monday.
As long as we kept it to a decent time frame, we probably could do
Before us.
5 o'clock
Okay.
before a select board meeting.
Does
Or-
anyone
or-
object to me bringing dinner?
No,
Or
not at all.
a 5:30.
all of us?
But the nice thing about having them piggyback, you pick the meeting that you don't wanna drag on, and you set the
A
time.
hard stop.
40,
Hard stop.
that's,
Yeah.
gives us a hard
It'd
stop.
be a hard stop at 45 minutes, cause we wouldn't
That's
wanna
right.
make anything.
Yep.
Right.
too-
Right.
Yep, so 5:30 on the 21st?
I mean, we're gonna have at least 3 site visits to run through.
Well, whatever we get through.
Okay.
Can we get the notes ahead of time on the
Yes, sorry,
Google Drive?
yes,
No, I
okay,
think that
yeah.
will be sufficiently
Okay.
helpful, cause then we'll all be able to
Okay.
review those and then we can just talk
Yeah.
about comparisons and ask questions instead of having to go through all.
The
So 5:30, what was
Yeah.
the date?
The 21st.
5:30 on the 21st.
You're making me move my heavily attended TA office hours.
You just told them simultaneously.
Yeah, because they're not heavily attended. One person came once.
That was nice.
One person came today.
Yes, Mike did come today.
5:30.
He was just early for his meeting.
I think so.
Oh,
Alright, and then, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Not debatable.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you, Bridget.